You're watching The Sports Objective, the podcast for Pirates. You're watching the Inside Slant on The Sports Objective. Over the next hour, the guys will be joined by play-by-play voices, beat writers, and other analysts from around the nation as they preview this weekend's college football action. Let's hear from you throughout the show via Facebook Live, on our YouTube channel, or on Twitter at The Sports OBJ. Now, here are the guys.
All right, welcome into the Inside Slant right here on the Sports Objective. We got a big show lined up as always. Week number 6 of college football. And ladies and gentlemen, the glue of the show is one of my brother from a different mother, Bubba Rosenbaum, all the way in China Grove, North Carolina. How are you?
I'm doing well, Dave. Hope you are.
I am looking forward to what a great night, an action-packed look at college football preview. We do this show every Thursday night live, and of course, you can go back anytime in the archives on Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget about that. Bubba, I'm very excited. You have a leadoff hitter tonight, so to speak. I know it's a football show, but man, you outdid yourself again.
Yeah, Dave, one of the top stories in college football this year has undoubtedly been the Kansas Jayhawks. And right now, I'd like to welcome in a first-time guest and their beat writer from the Topeka Capital Journal, Jayden Daniels. Jordan, we appreciate your time this evening.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
No doubt, Jordan. What a great story. The Kansas has been 5-0. In fact, I said the other night on our post-game show, if you will, we do it on Sunday nights. It's called the Pirate Playback. I mentioned in the second half of the show, I was asking the guys the biggest stories of the year. And my number one biggest surprise, if you will, story is Kansas. Talk about what's the mood like? Can you talk about the team and what a great coach, but hard to believe, man. 5 weeks and you've won 5 games. That's really awesome.
Yeah, like mood around campus is, I guess I should say, the Lawrence community in general is just night and day compared to a year ago at this time. Obviously there's a lot of interest around the men's basketball program. They went on and won a national title, so that had the fan base going really good. But I think, as Lance has said before, this fan base was starving for football to get to where it is now, and the fact that it's reached this point so quickly in his rebuild of the program after more than a decade of just really struggling. I think you can tell how much the fan base is energized by this, and obviously they sold out 3 straight games for the first time in more than a decade too. So it's a little crazy around here for sure.
No doubt. You talk about that enthusiasm. You mentioned the 3 straight sellouts. Obviously, something that has not been happening in several years there in Lawrence. But talk about college game day coming to town this weekend. Obviously, Sonny Dykes in his first year there at TCU, and the Horned Frogs are off to a tremendous start. Ranked 17th, and obviously the Jayhawks 19th. Who would have thunk it? But what an awesome sight that will be to see college game day in town.
Yeah, I'm a coach's poll guy, so I'm gonna go Kansas 17, TCU 18, just for me. But yeah, it's great, to see just a fan base rally around a team that deserves it, obviously, and like you mentioned, college game days in town, and that's they're setting up the stage and everything, all that set up, and obviously a lot of interest around it. People are there taking pictures and everything. It's brought a lot of excitement, a new element to add to what's been a pretty magical season so far for Kansas. It's really cool to see.
And I know we were talking in a pre-show in the green room that it's too early, but you have Lance Leipold, such a hot commodity right now, which is a great problem to have if you're Kansas. But with all the excitement, and with certainly, I know that you told us Kansas is trying to do everything they can to keep Coach. That's the best way to ask it, right?
Yeah, I think Travis has mentioned to different people in the last, in the weeks that have gone by that, they're going to do what they can to make sure Leipold's their coach for the future. I mean, even before the season started, they tacked on another year to his contract, sort of because of when he got here last season, and I believe, April, May, after spring practice, basically it had already wrapped up, and after all that time. So, the extra year was sort of a acknowledgement that 2021 was sort of a year zero. But yeah, they're doing a lot to try to keep them. Big announcement coming tomorrow regarding the football program that I think a lot of people anticipate is going to be surrounding the stadium and what they're going to do with renovations there, because they've been planning that for a while, looking at it really ever since Travis got to campus and took over as the AD not long before Leipold was brought on as the football coach. But yeah, doing what they can, and I'm not sure even a lot that they could do could probably take away the rumors of a school like Wisconsin or Nebraska or whatever other opening may pop up, because Lance is going to be such a hot name in the coaching carousel because of what he's done at Kansas. But I think you can definitely tell that Kansas is committed to trying to make sure that Lance is their coach for the long term, and for good reason, because they're ranked for the first time in a heck of a long time too.
Jordan, one of our good friends, Jay Sonhalter, he's an ESPN Plus analyst, and he was out there for the season opener against Tennessee Tech, and he had the opportunity, obviously, to visit with the coaching staff and be shown around the facilities, as you're saying, as far as how the Jayhawks have made a commitment and will continue to enhance that commitment. So just talk about over this last year plus, getting to know Coach Leipold and staff, some of the things that have been your biggest takeaways and why you think that he's having the success he's having.
Yeah, I think if you're around Lance long enough, you'll hear him say alignment a good bit, which I think is a pretty you know hot word in the college football industry right now. Just alignment, having alignment with coaching staff, players, administration, all that thing. And I think they've achieved that. They've got alignment. Obviously, you're going to have some movement in coaching staff and roster from time to time, especially when there's a new head coach coming in to take over a program. But I think there's alignment right now in what they're doing. Coaches who have connections to Leipold. I mean, both his coordinators have been with him for years, dating back to the Division III level at Wisconsin Whitewater, where he won 6 national championships. And I think as you've seen that alignment come, as you've seen the players buy into what he's doing, Matt Gildersleeve, their director of sports performance, has done a great job implementing what they want to implement, doing some cool stuff there. And I think right now you just see a team that's a whole lot more comfortable with what they're doing, considering, like I said, how late in the process Lance and his staff got here last year. Now they've had that full off season. They've been able to work through everything. Clearly, their offense is a lot more versatile. You had some great pieces on defense through the transfer portal and otherwise, and their defense is doing a lot better. Clearly, they're able to win a game that's only 14-11. So, those are sort of the things that are standing out right now with this group.
Very exciting time there, Lawrence, Kansas. With Kansas, we talked about, you were just talking about the basketball championship. Former East Carolina head coach Joe Dooley is out there in Kansas to be back with Bill Self, which is great. I know that's a great thing for him, for sure. As far as football, though, I mean, you already have the 5 wins. I know you guys. Obviously, to go to a bowl would be a big thing, but certainly looks like you guys. One of the questions I had for you, Jordan, is it's amazing the parity in as far as the Big 12 and college football as a whole, but especially the Big 12, I think is probably number one. Wouldn't you say?
You mean like parity in the Big 12? You're saying?
Yeah.
For football, I mean, I guess this year there's been a lot of it. So I don't know. Going through that basketball season this past year for men's basketball, I wonder if that's still more of that than football. But football has definitely shown it this fall. TCU just beat up on Oklahoma in a way I'm not sure many people expected them to before the season. Obviously, Kansas State's doing well. So say that Kansas has a lot to root for. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of parity right now in this conference.
Jordan, as you take a look at this team, if you would, talk about this offense. You mentioned not as many points and production against Iowa State, but prior to that, Houston, they had really lit up the scoreboard. Obviously, that game at West Virginia that went into overtime. So just talk about Jayden Daniels and the way this offense has really been rolling.
Yeah, I think I said it on a podcast, I think earlier today or maybe yesterday, whichever one it was. Like, if you were gonna sort of mold what you want a Division I quarterback to be, act like, play like, I feel like it's Jayden Daniels. Just the way he carries himself, the way he's been able to produce on the field, like that's what you would want in a Division I quarterback at this level. And And so I think, it obviously starts with him, but he's had a great offensive line to play behind. There was some talk about the depth beyond the first, 6, 7 guys, but those first 6, 7 guys have done so well, you haven't really need to talk about it all that much. Just with how well they've been playing. And then you've got a great group of running backs. Daniel Highshaw Jr. goes down with what could be a season-ending injury. He'll at least be out for a long time. But, Kai Thomas, Sevion Morrison are both Power 5 level transfers that have joined Kansas in the offseason. Kai Thomas led Minnesota in rushing last year, I believe. So it's not like he's not tested or proven. So, and then you got a wide receiver core where it's pretty balanced. So you don't really know who they're going to throw the ball to when you're defending Kansas. So yeah, there's a lot to like on that offense. And yeah, they had a down week against Iowa State, but you give them a couple different plays that were very nearly going their way, and Kansas probably has 28, maybe 31 points, and we're not talking about their defense or sorry, their offensive struggles as much.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really stood out to me looking over their offensive numbers. You've had 9 guys catch touchdown passes, and talk about the 2 leaders in terms of receptions and yardage have been Luke Grimm and Lawrence Arnold.
Yeah, they're really reliable pass catchers. I think heading into this offseason when Kansas was, formulating that room, didn't really add a whole lot, added a transfer from Minnesota. And Doug, he hasn't really necessarily done a whole lot yet this season on the field in games in terms of reception and production. So they really look to the guys who they brought back, which, as we mentioned, Lawrence Arnold and Luke Grimm. And they're, like I said, very reliable pass catchers, 2 guys you thought were probably going to be up there to lead the team. And they definitely delivered.
Talk about your defense as far as the Jayhawks. I know you talked about they had to rely there for not scoring a lot of points, but what about this defense? We know about Lance Leipold, but what about the defense, and how is that looking so far this year? Looking pretty good to be 5-0.
Yeah. Last season, there were definitely some games where they really struggled. I think Brian mentioned it. Brian, their defensive coordinator at Kansas, mentioned it. I think this week that last season they sort of played some different guys who they just sort of had to play them. They weren't necessarily ready to play, but with how limited Kansas was and what they were able to put on the field in terms of personnel, they had to play some of those guys. But now those guys have the experience. You had some pretty instrumental transfers like Lonnie Phelps at defensive end. And this group is really starting to show progression. Week after week, they're allowing the few points they have against FBS opponents so far in the about year and a half that Leipold and Borland have been in Lawrence. Excuse me. And so I think you're really starting to just see, like I mentioned earlier, that comfortability with each other translate to the field. Kenny Logan, senior safety, just had probably the best game of this season against Iowa State. Made some big plays. Craig Young, a transfer from Ohio State, has been great at linebacker, really playing free in his first season at Kansas. So, a lot to like in what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. And, we'll see what they're able to do against a TCU team that I think just put up 55 on Oklahoma.
Yeah, nice segue there. Over-under for this matchup is right at 70, depending on where you look. And Max Duggan, the performance he had against Oklahoma, as you mentioned, we're up 55 points, and I think in excess of right around 600 yards. And I know in excess of 600 yards, Max had about 500, but just a remarkable performance with his throwing and running abilities. And obviously Jayden Daniels, who we've already discussed, is a tremendous dual threat. So it would not shock me at all to see a lot of fireworks in this one.
Yeah, no, I think that's what a lot of people are probably expecting heading into this one. Like you mentioned, Max, I think it was Brian, described Max as sort of like someone who's able to run the ball, but he's built like a linebacker. Like he's not just some, frail guy out there trying to make things happen with his legs when that, it presents itself. But like I said, I think a lot of people, like you mentioned, are expecting a shootout. And I think there's definitely reason to think that might happen. But, I don't think a lot of people are expecting 14-11 for the Iowa State-Kansas game. So we'll see what happens.
Jordan, if you will, talk about the third side of the ball, if you will, with special teams. How have special teams been this year for the Jayhawks?
Yeah, I guess I would say it's been reliable. they haven't been losing games on special teams. Obviously, they haven't lost any games, but that's not been an area where you've looked and said, "Wow, if they don't figure this out, they're in trouble." I think Jacob, their kicker, has been pretty good at field goals. Obviously, missed I think a 50-yarder against Iowa State, but I think for the college level, 50 is a tough ask at times. But they haven't been missing extra points, haven't really been leaving points out on the field. So that's a good thing for them. And then obviously they've had some pretty big takeaways. A couple, recovered by Torrey Laughlin, one at West Virginia, one against Iowa State. That West Virginia led to points, Iowa State it didn't, but both times it takes away a possession from an offense that had been driving the ball on them. So I think overall, really good start to the year from their special teams. Haven't really seen a whole lot from their return game. I think if you're saying what's an area where you want to see improvement from that group for Kansas, and I'd probably say the return game. But in some ways, you're sort of dealing with what the other team gives you at that point. Because if they're kicking touchbacks and you're just making the smart decisions to not try to push anything, you might not get a good return game at certain points.
Taking a look at the upcoming schedule, after this, you have at Oklahoma and then also at Baylor. So two very challenging road tests there. Despite obviously you've had Oklahoma struggle out of the gates in the Big 12, but going to Norman and winning is obviously a tall task anytime.
Yeah, I think before the season, some of these games are ones that I highlighted as if you thought like, what could Kansas do in 2022 to surprise people nationally, like they did when they beat Texas down in Austin last season for a game that I was at, which was just a bizarre scene post game, just seeing all the Texas fans leaving the stadium. But yeah, it's definitely a tough portion of the schedule they're going into. It looks a whole lot different now because of Kansas and what they've been able to do so far this season. But like you mentioned, going to Norman's always going to be tough because it's Norman, it's Oklahoma. Baylor obviously just won the Big 12 title, so you got to give them credit. And then later on, they play, Oklahoma State. Still got to play Texas, Texas Tech, some other teams. So it's going to be a tough end of the season. But if they go 6-0 here with a win against TCU on Saturday, why not? You know what I mean?
No doubt. Obviously, no shortage of confidence now, and rightfully so. And it's certainly going to be very intriguing to see how the season plays out. As Dave mentioned, the Big 12 has been just a ridiculous amount of parity thus far. And who knows this year with Oklahoma already having losses, Texas has a loss, and it's really up for grabs.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think, obviously this weekend's going to be huge if Kansas can get to 3-0 in the Big 12. From at this point in the schedule, it's put itself in a great position to, even if it, takes a couple losses here and there, to be in a position to at least still compete and not have those losses mean what they could have before the season started.
No doubt, Jordan. Thank you so much as always for coming on here on the Inside Slant. Give everybody, I know you're the beat writer for the Topeka Capital Journal. Tell everybody about how they can follow you and as far as social media, and we'd love to be able to see your work as well.
Yeah, if you want to just go to the Topeka Capital Journal's website, you can find my stuff there. Social media, same sort of deal, but it's just my name, Jordan Guskey, on Twitter. If you go to Instagram, you can do that too, but it's just going to be pictures of dogs for the most part. So if you want to, feel free, look at pictures of dogs. But yeah, I think that's sort of where I'm at.
All right, thanks, man, for coming on. A great story in college football. The Kansas Jayhawks 5-0. We'll see how if the second half of the season plays out. Thanks so much, and love to have you back on. Enjoyed the visit.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it a lot. We're here on the Inside Slant. We do it every Thursday nights right here, getting you ready for a big college football weekend. And just like with Jordan with the Kansas Jayhawks and covering that team, what a great story, Bubba. And looking forward to seeing how the second half of the season plays out, no doubt about it. And Bubba, I know with this season, it's been, I think, with the Pirates, a little bit disappointing. We were talking about, I was talking about with a friend of mine. They were talking about we could easily be right before we came on 5-0. But just like that with the Jayhawks, they've had nice breaks there, and certainly great coaching staff. Appreciate all that they're doing there, and I'm happy. I was telling you, Bubba, I was telling Jordan, there's a lot of people acting like that, just writing that program off like they could never win. And look, they've got one of the best coaches in college football. That's the most obvious thing ever to say, but congratulations to them. I'm happy for that fan base, and it just goes to show that don't believe people when they say that something can't be done, like the Jayhawks never being, like being good again, or one of the worst jobs in college football. Whether that may have been true, Lance has owned it, and he's a great coach.
Yeah, Lance Leipold has won wherever he's been, and much like the coach the Pirates will be facing on Saturday afternoon, Willie Fritz. Whether it was Georgia Southern, I believe Sam Houston State, as well as some other Division II programs. Willie Fritz has been successful, and Lance Leipold has been much the same. He referenced his time. Jordan, that is, referenced Coach Leipold's time at Wisconsin Whitewater, where he won more national championships than he lost games, which is just remarkable. And then obviously Buffalo, not extremely familiar with their situation, but it's not like there, as well as Kansas. Yes, you certainly have things going for you, but relative to your competition, especially the Kansas job and their lack of success, it's very remarkable what he's done so quickly. It's not. I thought he would be successful when he went there, but if you'd have told me that he was going to be 5-0 and winning the way they're winning this early in his tenure, and we'll see how it plays out. But a heck of a coach and a heck of a job that he and his staff are doing so far in Lawrence. And it'll be interesting to see if he elects to remain there or if he chooses to move on to somewhere like Nebraska or elsewhere.
No doubt about it. And I think that with him, what's great about this story is that if anybody had said that they would be 5-0, unless you're a Nostradamus or you're a diehard Jayhawk Kansas football fan, and you just say, hey, we're going to win every game, which would be crazy. I saw them as I don't know about you, Bubba, I saw them, as a bowl team because he's a great coach and had the program headed in the right direction. But I don't know who else saw this coming at 5-0 for this program, but really proud and happy for them, and great to have Jordan on because, I was saying the other night, I think with Kansas has been great. Duke is a great story with Coach Mike Elko and Durham, and I think it's Syracuse is another program that comes to mind that's been a great surprise, and happy for those fans because I know they love their orange as far as basketball. But you remember, Bubba, we had a lot of great matchups there in the 90s with Syracuse. I'd love to see that team, at least a home and home, back on the schedule in the near future.
Yeah, I would love to see them back on the schedule. I won't hold my breath there because I know now this is going back, 15 to 20 years back to the early parts of the Terry Holland tenure, 2004, 2005. But I just remember Coach Holland talking about, Syracuse buying their way out of some games, if I am recalling correctly.
Okay.
And so it was a situation, for whatever reason they wanted out. But yes, the two programs did have a good relationship from, I guess, the late 80s, up.
All right, I lost you there, Bubba. If you can hear me, I've lost you. I can't hear you.
I want to say maybe it was 88 that they came to Greenville, and then 89 Pirates lost a heartbreaker in the Carrier Dome, and they played, not every year, but most every year there for several years throughout the 90s up until 2000, a game that the Pirates won in the rain at Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium.
Oh, man. And can you put this comment up, Bubba? Craig, our good friend from Virginia, great listener, viewer of our show of the Sports Objective. and he says his first game was Syracuse in '93 at home. And Craig,
I remember it well.
that was
Marcus Crandall's first game as a Pirate, and he and Morris Letcher, who we've had on the show, and living out in the Kansas City area and where he was originally from. But yeah, Mark Crandall and Mo Letcher, hooked up a couple times that night on seems like it was post routes going towards what is now the Murphy Center that was not there then.
right.
And the Pirates gave the Orange all they wanted for about 2.5 quarters, when then Syracuse's depth and experience, it seems like they had Quadri Ismail, that was known as the Missile. Obviously, his brother, the Rocket, played for Notre Dame.
Rocket, yeah.
But the Missile, had some good plays that night. And then I want to say Kirby Dardar. I know Johnny Gardner and I have talked about his name. Kirby Dardar was a name that he seemed like he played for Syracuse for about 8 years.
Well, this day and time, if it was during this era with COVID, you could no, not that many years, but certainly 5 or 6. And Bubba, by the way, Craig, I was there at that game too, and I remember that's the game. And Bubba, you're the historian of the show, but help me if I'm not mistaken. Was that not the game where those frat boys got in a fight and they?
It was.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a platform there. Probably about the 30-yard line. It's where the band not too far from where the band used to sit.
Yeah.
And yes, somebody got karate kicked to the chest up there on that platform, but fortunately the television cameras did not catch it. And like you said, it was a fight between two frats.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, actually, Bubba, they did. What happened was, that game, if you remember, those of us that if you love a night game, and Craig says, yep, it was the story of the game. Unfortunately, what happened is that was the last, I don't know, as far as it was a long time before we had a night game, because they had a whole bunch of time to drink some pirate beverages. And what happened is ESPN had the footage, but they broke away to commercial and they did everything they could. That's when Thursday night football used to mean something in college football. It doesn't to me as much now, because that was the game. It was one game. That's it. And Dave Hart had done a nice job by getting the ESPN contract. Not to get too off the topic, we're talking about the Inside Slant, a weekly college football preview. But that game, Bubba, was crazy because there was guys that got kicked out of the school. I don't know if you remember that, but there were kids that got kicked out of school, expelled from school, all kinds of stuff. And what happened is, the way they decided who the kids were that got expelled or who started the fight or whatever is ESPN was shooting on that side, and they had footage of the fight, and they did as ESPN would, a class act to go to commercial, do everything they could to not have a fight on national television for the Pirates. But that's what they went back and reviewed that film, and like a film study, if you will. And that's how they kicked those guys out. Craig, thank you for bringing that up, because that was a great memory as far as I love Pirate football games at night. And I'll just tell you this, Craig, where I was a winner? Where I was a winner is at the Pizza Hut on Greenville Boulevard. My best friend and I tore that buffet up at Pizza Inn that's no longer there. On Greenville Boulevard, but it was a great night. A whole bunch of great pizza. I was stuffed. I shouldn't have eaten that much, and I ate too much, and then went to that game. And to have that happen, and of course, Marcus Crandall being ECU Hall of Famer, what a great career Mark had, and he's been a guest on the show. But anyway, let's get back to the.
Hey, and later that night, you were like Craig's dad and Friday. Nobody go in the bathroom for 35 to 45 minutes, and somebody open a window.
Well, what happened is at that time when I was going to East Carolina, I was living on a mobile home park. It's Highland Mobile Home Park, and it's right near Burke Valley. And I was living in a single wide, so I could have blown up that. I didn't, but I could have potentially blown up that single wide trailer. I can tell you that right now. But anyway, the Inside Slant, a weekly college football preview. Appreciate you joining us tonight. And if you've got a question or comment, do you like Craig? And Matt put up there, Matt said Big 12 is much closer to the AAC than the SEC. And he had that on when Jordan was on. But anyway, I think you're right, Matt. And Craig said he's dying. Craig and I believe, are the same age. I graduated in 95, or he might be a little bit younger, but those were the days, man. I said that when we started this podcast 4.5 years ago, Bubba, and when you came aboard and you and I were talking initially, that I pray to God that we can have Pirate football like we did back. You and I were reminiscing about times in the 80s and 90s, and when Pirate football was, not that it wasn't good during Skip Holtz or Roughing Me Neal, don't get me wrong, but that's when I was really, really that's when I really was starting out as a Pirate in 1986 as a fan, and just great stuff. The dogs then said, eating and blowing up the toilet, please.
Dave, you got to stop giving people visuals.
Yeah, well, no, you brought it up.
I'm kidding.
No, the dogs.
Yes, the dogs den. I was. It was just something when Dave said what he said.
About pizza.
I could not resist the Friday reference, but I just thought about, was it John Witherspoon that was Craig's dad in the movie Friday?
That sounds right.
Hilarious scene, but now getting back to football, last weekend we talked about some of the stunning results. So not so much that TCU beat Oklahoma, but the way in which they beat them. Being up 41-17 at halftime, rolling up about 670 yards of offense. So it's going to be very interesting to see this game between Kansas and TCU. But obviously some of the other major takeaways about last weekend, Georgia having the scare in Columbia, Mizzou taking them down to the wire. Who would have ever thought that? And then Dave, what were some of the other big takeaways for you? One of the other ones for me, seeing that UCLA is for real now. Washington may not have been, we'll see, quite as good as their ranking would have led you to believe at number 15, but nonetheless, Chip Kelly and the Bruins seem to really be getting things together in Westwood.
No doubt about it. Bubba, with that, you make a great point. I'll say this about UCLA. We all knew that Chip Kelly was going to get it done, right? We knew he was going to get it done. And the one thing, Bubba, that's disappointing is that they're having such a great season. Have you heard out there in the Rose Bowl, they're having to give tickets away just to try to get enough fans out there? I mean, that is so sad. And the UCLA fans should be ashamed of themselves. And if you're a college football fan like Bubba and I are, and all of you watching and listening, then you would probably be going to those games just for the heck of it. If we lived out there, we would be going there just to be able to watch this team.
Yeah, I did not see a crowd shot from that Washington game, but going back to the South Alabama game, which they won on a last-second field goal, it was extremely sparse. So it will be interesting to see how they draw as the season goes on, if they continue to have the success they're having and are vying for a Pac-12 title. But Dave, right now, very excited to be joined by a first-time guest on the show. We'd like to welcome in from Go Vols 24/7 Sports, Wes Rucker. Wes, we appreciate your time this evening.
Hey, how y'all doing tonight?
Doing
well. Hope you are. And, as you take a look at things, Wes, obviously Tennessee's having their best season in years, and they're headed down to the Bayou, getting ready to take on number 25 LSU. So before we dive into that matchup, just tell us about the season to date for Josh Heupel's ball club.
Well, it's certainly been a good one. It's Tennessee was expected to be maybe at least 3-1 by this point. I think being 4-0 certainly isn't a shock when you look at the team, but it's a good thing for Tennessee. And Tennessee, that Florida game it's always Tennessee's SEC opener. And for years, when they've lost that game, it's just kind of sent things sometimes into a bad spot before they really got started. And now that Tennessee's won that game for the first time since 2016. I think the second time in the past like 18 years, which is insane to think about for like a top 10 all-time winning program. But that's what Tennessee's has been recently. But getting that game out of the way, getting that win, kind of opens things up for some real possibilities of some exciting, sort of really nationally meaningful games in October and November, which is what this program has been for most of its existence. It hasn't been recently, but it's always been financed that way. It's always had the ability to do this. And now that they've got a coach in there that has got the thing figured out, got a great quarterback, some exciting players on offense, a couple solid defenders, and here they are.
And Wes, let's talk about the program as a whole real quick before we dive into this week's matchup. There's so many. We're talking about our last guest covering, obviously, the Kansas Jayhawks. What a great story they are. But when it comes to Tennessee, what a proud tradition you have. And you have an awesome stadium. I've been there twice. It's beautiful there on the campus. The great thing about Neyland Stadium is that you would not expect a stadium that's whatever, 100,000. Aesthetically, it is absolutely gorgeous where it's located. When you walk in, it's like it was for me a wow factor being a college football fan. We actually just walked in the stadium just to see it. We were the Tennessee School for the Deaf. There in Knoxville, where I was coaching in Eastern North Carolina, and Wilson at Eastern North Carolina School for the Deaf. We played Tennessee, and we got a chance to go across town to the Neyland Stadium. But what a great stadium! But can you talk about the program? And as far as there's a lot of people, I'm sure, that had written off Tennessee, but for us, a lot of us that are college football fans, we feel like Tennessee is one of those programs that needs to be good in order for college football to be good. There's other programs you start naming off brand name teams, but Tennessee is right up there when it comes to college football at the top of the list.
Well, first off, this was a shock out of nowhere. I'm so glad you mentioned Tennessee School for the Deaf. I love the Vikings. If I had known, I would have worn. I actually have a TSD shirt.
Oh wow!
Because a few years ago, when they won the Deaf School National Championship, and there wasn't a lot made of it locally, and I got kind of furious at that. And I was like, "There's national champions here. Let's do something here." And so some of their uniforms needed to be, tuned up, and cheerleaders were wearing all kinds of mismatched stuff. So we started to drive, and we got some things turned around there, at least for a little bit. And I love that school. I used to live right there, walk down the street from that stadium. I used to love going down there on Thursdays and Fridays to watch some games. I love TSD. I'm glad you mentioned that. But yes, the Neyland Stadium, it's interesting because, from the outside, they're doing some things now to make it a little more aesthetically pleasing outside, because it's kind of like an erector set or Castle Grayskull is where it's been for years, kind of looking outside. But when you get inside, it's just gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And the thing that makes Neyland, I think, a little different from most of the other 100,000 plus seat stadiums in the country, and I've been to most of them. I've been fortunate to do this for a while now. I may not look it, but I'm 40. Just kidding. I know I look like it. But it's the rest of the 100,000 seaters. They kind of fan out a little bit. Like the Michigans. The Rose Bowl is a pretty big stadium. It kind of fans out. Neyland goes straight up, and it's kind of an imposing coliseum when you're a visiting team in there. But what it means is that if you're in the stadium, you got pretty decent sight lines everywhere, because you're just you might have to get a Sherpa to take you up to the top, but once you get up there, you still got a pretty solid view. And it's a unique place to watch games. It's very loud. That color instantly, no matter where you are, and that checkerboard pretty much no matter where you are. And it's one of those iconic old football cathedrals, and it's unfortunately not had a lot of great football for the past dozen or so years, but looks like maybe, knock on wood, they've got the thing turned around now. And I also think it's good for college football when Tennessee's good. I think college football will be okay without Tennessee, but it's better with Tennessee. It's one of those teams that has a huge fan base across the country, big alumni base. It's a big school, a lot of prominent alumni, NFL guys. It's also got a lot of people who really hate it. And so that those kind of teams that people either really love or really hate, it's kind of like the color orange, right? Tennessee's orange. You either love it or you hate it. A lot of people do. And so I think it's better for the conversation when they are what they should be.
And Bubba, before you, I was also mentioned, I actually am a fan of the song I Love Rocky Top. So even though I'm not a volunteer grad or a fan, I do like that song a lot.
I used to love that. It was that old Lou Holtz quote about how what was it? Holtz said, he goes, it's one of the only places I've been where I've had my ass kicked and I walked away, happily, kind of whistling the fight song. He's like, what am I doing? I'm walking to the sideline. I'm whistling Rocky Top, and I'm like, wait, I just got beat by 30 points. Why am I doing this? But yeah, it's one of those songs. It's like War Eagle. You just hear it and you instantly kind of know where you are.
And taking a look at this matchup, Wes, two tremendous quarterbacks to this point in the season, Jayden Daniels for LSU and obviously Hendon Hooker lighting it up for the Vols. So, what's your take on those guys as we enter Saturday's ball game?
Well, Hooker's been, I mean, maybe revelation's too strong a word, but he's been quite a player for Tennessee. He fits this offense with Heupel really well. And I use the word kid a lot when I'm talking about these guys because most of them feel like kids to me. Like the older I get, they feel more and more like kids. But Hooker's not. Hooker's 24 years old. That's a man. That's a grown man. And he's a really mature kid. He's been that way since he was probably 15 years old. He's just he was raised the right way. He's got good parents. He's a really focused kind of kid, a really polite kid. People like being around him. And he's also really athletic and really good. And he fits this offense well. I don't know that he's like an elite NFL prospect. A lot of teams are kind of not sure about him that way. But for what Tennessee's doing and what they want him to do, he's fantastic. Can make every throw. He look at his stat line against Florida. I mean, it was just ridiculous. 24 of 29 for 349 and 3 touchdowns. And then he ran for 115 yards and another touchdown. It's just incredible. And Daniels is a really interesting player to me because, Brian Kelly, say what you will about the guy. He's got a nice offense and he's a good football coach. He may not be a nice guy, but he's a nice football coach. His teams have always won. And Daniels is a guy who I think fits what he wants to do pretty well. He hasn't been great against, decent teams this season. He's kind of beaten up on the lesser teams on the schedule. Only had, I think, 80, 85 yards passing last week at Auburn, and they won the game, which is the important part. But Daniels has kind of been pushed by Kelly to be a little bit more aggressive, push it downfield. Don't be terrified of turning the ball over. You don't want to turn it over, but don't be afraid to do it. But it's interesting that going into this game, what's it, October? It'll be October 8th when that game starts, and neither quarterback's thrown a pick this year. I mean, they're both really good quarterbacks.
Yeah, and Hendon Hooker, for our viewers and listeners, obviously from Greensboro, North Carolina, so that's another interesting note.
And proud of it.
Yep, and I believe Dudley High School, when Dudley High School had an awful lot of success, and he began his career at Virginia Tech and was very good with the Hokies. He completed in excess of 60% of his passes for nearly 3,000 yards, 22 touchdowns, and just 7 picks at Virginia Tech. And then, so I really thought once Josh Heupel gets his hands on Hendon Hooker and has the chance to develop him even more, that he would have the success he's having.
Yeah, and Hooker's got something like I don't have the exact numbers with me, but I think since he became Tennessee's starting quarterback, he has accounted for, I think, about 50 touchdowns and 2 interceptions since he's been Tennessee's starting quarterback, which is just absolutely silly when you think about it. I mean, the numbers he's put up are they're like a video game, and he's a really good player, and he fits Tennessee's offense really well. He kind of peppers, kind of smooths over some cracks that they've got in other areas. He's been really, really good.
Yeah, I know Shane Matthews, who's one of the Florida Gators legends and 2-time SEC Player of the Year, current analyst on their radio network. He said right now, if he had to pick a front runner for the Heisman, it would be Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, and I think it was RG3 said the same thing last week or a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I mean, it's early in the season, right? And Tennessee still got to go to Death Valley. It's still got to play Kentucky in a couple weeks. It's still got to travel to Athens, play Georgia, and oh, by the way, next week Alabama comes to town here in Knoxville. So yeah, I mean they got some hurdles in front of them, but if he goes out there and performs against those teams, why not?
Oh, no doubt about it. It's going to be interesting. In fact, that Alabama test, I don't know. I mean, I think with Tennessee and especially with Josh Heupel, I think you guys have a shot, certainly compared to other years where you would say, "Oh man, this is going to be a really tough year." But with Alabama, I don't know that Alabama's good, but Alabama and Georgia are good this year, but not. They seem like they are. In other words, normally they'd be invincible. Where you're going, well, they're going to probably be automatic in the playoffs. But I think if there's a year to get Alabama, this might be a game where you can get them.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about Tennessee is that Tennessee's a team that nobody gets excited to play. Tennessee's a team that if you're an opposing coach, it kind of keeps you up a little bit at night, just because yes, there are some things about Tennessee's defense that can be exposed. There are some issues there, some things that have got to get better. But that team offensively can just tear you to pieces. I mean, Cedric Tillman, one of the best receivers in the country, did not play against Florida, and you would not know it by looking at the numbers. It was they're explosive, they're efficient, they're the fastest offense in the country. I think they run a play usually with more than 20 seconds still on the clock. They try to go about 7 seconds or so after the previous play has been whistled dead. They want to have the ball snapped and go again. They go fast and they go at you and they spread the field. They take shots downfield. You don't like to play them. You really don't. And Florida, went for it 6 times on 4th down in that game. And I think a big part of the reason for that was Billy Napier is not a dumb guy. He knew that every time I punt the ball here, I'm really, really hurting my chances of winning this game. And plus, if I punt it here, they'll probably be right back where this play is in a snap or two anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and go for it because I need to score to keep them, kind of keep themselves in the game.
No doubt. And as far as this program, where do you see it going with Josh Heupel has done a really nice job. And I know that you guys have had tough times. There's been so many coaches, and I know people that are friends of mine who are Vols fans, and I would see posts over the years before Heupel, and people were like, "We deserve better. We're a great fan base. We deserve better." And I was like, and even though I'm not a Vols guy, I was like, I totally agree with him. I mean, it's like we talk about the fan base, the stadium, the rich tradition, the rabid fan base is just goes without saying. But where do you see Heupel? Do you think he stays there a good while? I guess it may be hard to say, or do you think maybe he leaves and somebody else comes in? Do you have any idea?
It's always so tough to say because you know what? I mean, things are so kind of transient these days, and
Right.
in a month from now, people here could hate Josh Heupel. I very much doubt that, but I mean, you never really know. But I'll say this about Heupel: he likes being here. He's not a glitz and glam kind of guy. He's from a small town in South Dakota. He played his college football. He finished his career anyway at Oklahoma. He's not like this city's more than enough for him in that way. Well, of course, Metro Knoxville is like 1 million people now in terms of the metro area, but so it's not a town, it's a city. But I think he fits here. I think he's comfortable here. His family likes it here. His assistants are happy here for the most part, I think. And I think it's hard to say because, what if one day like Oklahoma came calling? That would maybe tug at his heartstrings a little bit, even though he was fired as the OC there at one point. So maybe not the best feelings all the time, but that's certainly a place that means a lot to him. You never really know. Somebody could come with enough money that, Tennessee's like, oh gosh, even for us, I don't know if we want to match that. I never know, but I think the SEC is so brutal. This is a tough job. It's a tough league. But if you're in Tennessee and you do your job right, you can be successful. And I think he's happy here. And I don't think he's certainly in any hurry to go anywhere right now.
I hope not for Tennessee because it's like I said, with after what T. Martin back in the day with that national championship, and it's you would think it's kind of ironic because there's certain teams like Notre Dame. I was like 15 when they won the national championship. I think in '88 is the last time. And Tennessee is another one that you would think with the proud tradition, like we talked about, that they would have another championship or two under their belt between now and then.
Well, what happened, it's kind of a long story because Tennessee put itself in this position, but also programs around Tennessee started to figure some things out. Things just happened for Tennessee at the wrong time. Tennessee, for the longest time, was the model of consistency. I mean, I think Tennessee and Michigan were like the only programs that had never lost 7 games in a season. I mean, they were just kind of consistently every year, at least pretty good. But what happened was Tennessee made a change, coaching with Fulmer. Kiffin comes in, then a year later he goes, and he regrets it, but he did. He left. If he could do it over again, he wouldn't have done it, and he admits that. But he left, and then Dooley comes in. You got 3 coaches in 3 years. Unless you're Arkansas State, that's going to give you problems, right? I mean, they change their coach every time the wind blows there, but they still seem to be pretty good most of the time. But at Tennessee, that happened, and it really put them behind scholarship numbers. They were in the third system in 3 years. And then Georgia started figuring out what Georgia should have been all along. Kentucky hires Stoops and starts to kind of get things going in a better direction. Vanderbilt for a while has James Franklin and is a competitive team.
Right.
Clemson becomes a dominant force nationally, which, Clemson's really pretty close to Knoxville, and they bumped heads a lot in recruiting. And a lot of players that used to go to Tennessee used to go to Tennessee, went to Clemson, right? I mean, that national championship team for Clemson, you had a wide receiver from Knoxville Catholic High School. You had a quarterback who's from Upper East Tennessee and grew up a Tennessee fan. You had also a wide receiver from Oak Ridge High School, which is just a stone's throw down the road. I mean, they've had, those kind of things impacted Tennessee. North Carolina made some better hires in football and started to get a little bit better. Just things kind of came at the wrong time for Tennessee. You had Saban, you had all these guys, Georgia figuring it out, and Tennessee. It's kind of like if you're a NASCAR person, like you fall out of the draft in Talladega or Daytona, it's hard to catch up. And everything just happened at the wrong time for them. And they kept digging the hole worse themselves. And lo and behold, you look up and you're a top 10 all-time winning program, but you've kind of sucked for a decade. And that's what happened to Tennessee.
You're watching and listening to the Inside Slant, a weekly college football preview. We're visiting now with Wes Rucker from 24/7 Sports with Go Vols. And there's a couple people we want to mention too that had. If you have a question or comment tonight, we got a couple from Facebook. If you want to take them, Wes, let's do the first one here from one of our regulars, Johnny Gardner. He asked, "How is the freshman wide receiver Webb progressing?"
I think Caleb Webb's a good player. It's kind of a problem right now at Tennessee in that there's a lot of places where Tennessee would like to have better depth. Tennessee's got a bunch of dudes at wide receiver. But I think Caleb Webb is a nice player. I don't know how much he's going to play this year, but he is progressing well. Tennessee staff likes him. And I think he's a guy who I remember the first time I talked about Caleb Webb after he enrolled, I was talking to Hendon Hooker, and he said that he threw a ball up in the end zone kind of in practice, maybe a ball you wouldn't throw in a game, but you throw in practice just to kind of give your receiver a shot. And he said Webb kind of went up there and plucked away a 50-50 ball from an older DB, and he was like, whoa. Okay, kid, I didn't know you could do that. So, yeah, I mean, I think Caleb Webb, Chaz Nimrod also is a kid who I think is a freshman at Tennessee with a world-class name, but he's also a good player. And then another world-class name, the freshman wide receiver, Squirrel White, one of the fastest college football players I've seen. He's had a couple big plays already at Tennessee. He's a kid who wouldn't shock me if he made a big play on Saturday.
And let's pick up Craig's question. Craig is from the great state of Virginia. He said, "What's a fun fact about Tennessee that people associated with the program would know, but outsiders may not?"
That outsiders may not. Let's see here. I think what's interesting about Tennessee is, well, first off, I mean, the nickname Volunteers, you don't really see that one very often. That's a really interesting thing. Like you can't, you got a lot of Eagles and Tigers and other things. You don't see a lot of Volunteers. But I think what's interesting about Tennessee as a program is if you kind of just look at a map, and Tennessee touches, I think, it's like 7 or 9 other states.
8 states.
8 states. There you go. Split the difference. Yeah, 8. And so what's interesting is when you go to different parts of the state, you find how much different games mean to different people. Like there's people in West Tennessee who things stop for them when it's like a Tennessee Ole Miss game, whereas people on the east side of the state are like, man, until Lane Kiffin was there, it wasn't really that big of a deal. You got people who live in Chattanooga who like live and die with that Tennessee-Georgia game. You got people who live up in the Tri-Cities who get really excited when like Tennessee and Virginia Tech play, because they're just, a couple hours away from each other. Tennessee's randomly has a border with Missouri. And so you got people over there who care a little bit about that. That's what's interesting to me about Tennessee is just the way that it's shaped geographically and how weird the state is in terms of the just how much different games mean to different people. Because there's nothing more important than the Tennessee-Alabama rivalry. It's one of the most historically significant in all of college football. It's a big deal. They have to play it every year. It is a big deal. But other than that, I mean, there's people who live up in Jellicoe in that area who Tennessee, they just want to beat Kentucky. You know, I mean, it's the Nashville people, obviously, you know, you lose to Vanderbilt, your life's hell for a while. So I think that's an interesting part of it for me, is that just sort of because of the way Tennessee is shaped, that really has an interesting imprint on the program. And also one other interesting thing is that and Tennessee's used this line in recruiting for years because it's true. Where Knoxville is, you can get to, I think, 2/3 of the population of the U.S. in one day's drive. So, you know, you can get up to Canada pretty quickly, quicker than you can get from Johnson City to Memphis, it seems like. You know, I mean, it's you can go to a lot of places in recruiting, and I think that helps Tennessee too.
You're talking about Tennessee, and those of us that are in North Carolina, I'm actually in the eastern part of the state, closer to Greenville, where East Carolina is located.
Yep.
Bubba's in the western part of North Carolina. And I've noticed that there's a lot. You were talking about. There's a lot of people that are Tennessee fans that are in western North Carolina as well.
Yeah, I think those are called the Vol Heels. You know, they kind of like traditionally, unless Ernie and Bernie were at Tennessee, they were kind of Tennessee football fans and then UNC basketball fans in some way. You know, they just kind of pick whichever one was better in whichever sport. But yeah, I mean, there is a lot, and Tennessee does that Big Orange Caravan thing every year where they go around, talk to different booster clubs around the country, and I'm consistently amazed by, no matter where it is. You know, you go to obviously Atlanta, you know, Charlotte. I've been to a couple like in Florida. You know, there's one in DC. You know, New York, Chicago, where like these bars and areas get like full, and there's like you know, in New York City, there's one of the bars there is like a Tennessee bar on Saturdays, and where the alumni meet, and that's, I guess it shouldn't be surprising because the school's got almost like 30,000 students or whatever. It's going to have a lot of alumni, but just the imprint of Tennessee around the country is something that has always, if you're maybe on the West Coast or maybe you're not super familiar with the SEC, you know, you might not know it, but you know, it's, if Tennessee played a game on the surface of Mars, you would have a lot of people there wearing orange. And you can obviously take a boat to the game at Neyland Stadium, which is kind of neat too.
It's going to be really interesting to see about that we were talking about, the great story with obviously Kansas, what Josh Heupel, and obviously you have a great athletic director too. So coming over from UCF with Danny White. So that
yeah,
helps.
I mean, you think about it in football. There, like right now, I think last year at the end of the baseball season, regular season, they were ranked number 1 nationally. At the end of the basketball season, they were ranked number 5 nationally, and right now in football, they're ranked number 8 nationally. So they're winning right now. They need to get more ships, but in terms of kind of putting yourself in position in the regular season, they're kind of getting back to what they should be.
All right, sorry I lost you there. It froze up a little bit, but certainly with the impact with Tennessee having a great baseball program and basketball, and you're talking about all that. So I know it's been a great time if you're a Vols fan, for sure. Looking forward to another great season, I'm sure, with basketball and with baseball. I'd love to have you back on. Well, tell everybody before we let you go, man, how can we obviously are big fans of 24/7 Sports with Stephen Igo with Voice of Colors, a good guy, and our very first guest of the show, by the way. How can people follow you? And I'm sure we can just click over and follow your work. If you're already on 24/7 with that network, you can do that. But how can people follow your work?
Well, if someone would actually come over to Old North Knoxville right now, which is where I live, and help me finish my couple stories for the night and pack a bag before I leave for Baton Rouge tomorrow, that would be really nice.
Okay.
But in terms of finding the stuff, yeah, you can go to govols247.com, where we've got a 6-person staff that covers Tennessee in every sport. You know, travels to every sport, everywhere Tennessee plays. We're going to be there. We got coverage for you around the clock. You know, recruiting coverage throughout the year, obviously in every sport. You know, the podcast that comes out, you know, about 3 times a week there, the Go Vols 24/7 podcast. But you can get started, and it's always free for a while to check it out there. Got a good deal. Go to govols247.com, or if you want to just come say hey to me on Twitter, that's twitter.com/WesRucker247.
Wes, great to have you on. Great visit with you tonight. Good luck to the Vols the rest of the way. and love to have you back on, certainly with maybe the end of the football season, basketball and baseball for sure.
No problem. Anytime, guys. Be well. Have a
All
good
right,
weekend.
you too. Take care. All right. Bye-bye. Great stuff there. Appreciate Wes very much. And great guest, great knowledge there. And hey, Bubba, I have to say that when he was talking about Tennessee School for the Deaf, a lot of great people there. I'm a huge fan of Knoxville. I've been, like I said, to Neyland Stadium twice. It was just, I believe you've been there, haven't you, Bubba?
I have. I've only been to the spring game. It's when I was going to school at University of the Cumberlands and Cumberland College as it was then. But I did have a chance to go to a spring game there, the orange-white game, and went to camp there back. I guess it was between my 7th and 8th grade years in the summer of 1995. It was actually the year that the Pirates played over there.
Yeah, the Labor Day weekend.
And played against Peyton Manning in his freshman season. But But yeah, earlier today I actually had the opportunity to catch up with Brent Beard, SEC focused podcaster, and he's on a lot of shows throughout the Southeast, be it in the state of Florida, Alabama, etc. And kind of a fun fact about Brent is he has a twin brother in the state of Alabama, and it's an identical twin. And they look and sound just alike, and it's hard to tell the two apart. And he also, he covers college football, and where Brent is more focused on, the Florida Gators and the SEC there, based out of the Jacksonville, Florida area. His brother is, I want to say, right around Birmingham. So Brent Beard, excellent conversation that we had earlier this afternoon, and let's go to that conversation with Brent Beard, the host of the Second Helping podcast, and then also a Heisman Trophy voter. And here's that conversation with him right now. Now on the Inside Slant, very excited to be joined by a guy we've had on the show before, the co-host of the Second Helping podcast. He's also been a Heisman voter for years, does a variety of other interviews throughout the Southeast. Welcome back to the show, Brent Beard. Brent, we appreciate your time this evening.
Glad to be on with you. And as we head into another big week of college football, I really don't want to say that we're nearing the halfway point, because that would upset me too much. But we're enjoying every moment and every weekend, right?
No doubt. I'm right there with you. I was thinking about that. It's crazy. You wait forever for it to get here, and then when it arrives, it's here and gone in a blink of an eye. It's hard to believe it's week 6, but taking a look at, I know your primary focus is the SEC, obviously, as your co-host, as I mentioned, of the Second Helping podcast. So we'll start there and then maybe touch on a few national notes. But obviously a huge matchup this weekend down in Baton Rouge. You have number 8 Tennessee. The Vols are better than they've been in years. What a job Josh Heupel's done there. They are a slight 3-point favorite against number 25 LSU, and Brian Kelly has really, steadied the ship after a rough start against Florida State. What are your thoughts on this one?
It should be a really good matchup. I do like LSU, Bubba, simply because I think LSU's got the better defense. The truth of the matter is, Tennessee is 128 out of 131. It's a mouthful, isn't it? In pass defense, allowing over 300 yards a game passing. So, but the reality is, can Jayden Daniels, the LSU quarterback, who against Auburn last week threw for a whopping 80 yards, can they improve to the point to where the passing game will be a real factor for LSU? John Emery, gosh, if people haven't seen what he was able to do last week, Emery just ran all over Auburn. Now, he had been suspended all of last year and the first 2 games of this year, but he came back. So that adds a lot to the rushing attack. But what I do like that Brian Kelly has done early, defense travels, doesn't it, Bubba? And what you've got here is defensively, they are playing well, hoping the offense will catch up. I know they regret that early loss to Florida State, but they were trying to figure it out and made a season's worth of mistakes in that loss. But that they are coming back. We don't know for Tennessee when Cedric Tillman's going to return. The really good wide receiver, Brew McCoy, is back and doing very well for Tennessee. I mean, Hendon Hooker's a Heisman candidate that everyone's looking at this point. And why is this a noon game is another question that I would have. As much of a significant factor it is in the league. But yes, I'm with you. It should be a lot of fun. And if LSU can do anything throwing the ball, I think their defense is going to be stout enough for them to win the game. But I would agree. This easily and may be the headline game of the week.
That's an excellent question regarding the game time. I was stunned when I looked this one up last night and saw that it was a nooner instead of 3:30 or a night game, because I was thinking, hey, how's Hendon Hooker and that Tennessee offense going to handle the environment there at Tiger Stadium in a potential night game? And I saw it was 12 o'clock. But, very intriguing quarterback matchup. I'm very interested to see how he handles that LSU defense, which is solid. And then you mentioned Jayden Daniels. Very interested to see how he does. I think he'll do very well if Tennessee's and those stats you rattled off are any indication.
Also, Bubba, we've been talking about Jayden Daniels. He actually got hurt in the game. They took him out for a while. There was no structural damage. Garrett Nussmeier got in for a little bit. But I still think Daniels will be the guy, and he should be healthy enough to go.
Moving on, going up to Stark, Vegas, you have number 23 Mississippi State entered the poll after their victory over Jimbo Fisher and the Texas A&M Aggies, 42-24 last weekend in Starkville. They are going to be going against Arkansas secondary that has been chewed up pretty well.
It has. And listen, this is a big part of this game. We're not sure yet if KJ Jefferson's even going to play. The Arkansas quarterback, he has had an injury in the Alabama game, and it was a situation where if he didn't practice by the end of the week, he was not going to play. So there remains some mystery there. But again, Arkansas struggled at the end against Alabama. They had a great comeback, frankly, after Bryce Young got hurt. And I love Rocket Sanders. I mean, he gained over 100 yards on a very good Alabama defense. But the Hogs could not derail the Alabama running game with Jahmyr Gibbs in the fourth quarter. Of that one. So, and when Jalen Catalon went out for Arkansas in that secondary, that really hurt them. And they were in a situation, Bubba, where they led the league in sacks, but they were last in the league in pass defense. That's an odd combination, is it not? But I think all in all, this will be a very interesting game. Again, a lot of it going to depend upon how Jefferson's doing. But boy, State has really, I think, been one of the, I don't know if surprises is the best word, but I think all in all, they've been fairly consistent. I know with the LSU game that it really wasn't as much. But I really appreciate what State has done. Mike Leach has been great as far as what they do. Will Rogers is one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Throws about 50 passes every game, and that's no exaggeration. But their offense is so good in so many ways as far as just for what they do. And they actually ran the ball for 144 yards last week. Which was very impressive. But defense, very tough. one of the better secondaries anywhere. I think State probably wins this game. But, Bubba, I will say, even though Arkansas will be on a losing streak, I still think that the Hogs end up at least 7-5, 8-4. And I still think Sam Pittman's done one of the better jobs in the entire league.
Definitely agree with you regarding Sam Pittman. A big fan of his. What a character and awesome personality. But sticking within the SEC West, tell us about that matchup with Alabama and Texas A&M. It's a game that most people, understandably, expect to be very lopsided. The Crimson Tide's a 24-point favorite.
This was supposed to be at the beginning of the year, the game of the year, and game day would be there. Well, game day's not going to be there. Game day is going to be in Kansas for the TCU game, and game day will not be at the Red River Shootout with OU and Texas either, because both teams are unranked for the first time in decades. I think Bama wins this game. Certainly a revenge game for them. They've had this game circled, Bubba, for months, frankly. Now, the big question is, will Bryce Young play? And if he plays, how much will it be? Jalen Milroe got some very valuable experience in the win over Arkansas. His 77-yard run really got the Tide rolling again, and then they started running Jahmyr Gibbs behind a really good performance by that offensive line. McLaughlin, the center for Alabama, really made a real impact in the center of that offensive line. But the game's in Tuscaloosa. Tide fans will certainly be up for this game. It doesn't mean Bama's perfect. They've got wide receivers who are dropping the ball. They've got to get separation. We haven't seen Tyler Harrell yet, the Louisville transfer at Alabama. And as far as A&M's concerned, could Connor Weigman, the freshman quarterback, play a little bit? Max Johnson got hurt in the game last week, so they're kind of at revolving quarterbacks. Devon Achane is the best running back, certainly in the top 5 in the league, and he would carry that offense. Anaya Smith, one of the better A&M players, got hurt a few weeks ago. He's out for the year, unfortunately. The offensive line for A&M is really struggling at this point, and A&M, frankly, Bubba, is looking at another 8-4, 7-5 year, which can't make those folks happy. But Jimbo's got about a $90 million buyout, so he certainly is not going anywhere. But he's got some real decisions to make as the year goes along. They're good defensively, except that we didn't see that much against Mississippi State, did we? But I think the Tide rolls in a big revenge game for them as Alabama gets ready next week for a gargantuan game going to Knoxville against Tennessee.
No doubt. And shifting over to the SEC East, and you have number 13 Kentucky coming off that loss down in Oxford. Very competitive game, entertaining game against the Rebels, who are now in the top 10. But Kentucky, Will Levis, very talented quarterback, but they've really struggled to protect him. And he's been beat up. I know he's currently listed as questionable for Saturday's game against South Carolina.
Yeah, that's the big question in this game, frankly, is will he play? Now, and I give Matt Jones from the Kentucky Sports Network credit for this. Matt said that it's not his finger that's hurt, it's another injury. We don't know what that is. We know Levis is a tough kid, and I think he'll probably end up playing, but we're not sure about that. Now, what helps Kentucky is Chris Rodriguez is back at running back. He didn't have 100 yards against Ole Miss because I'm sure he was a marked man, but he makes such a difference. Cavassier Smoke certainly is very good. The Kentucky offensive line is struggling. This is amazing, Bubba, but we're barely at the halfway point of the season, and Will Levis has been sacked almost as many times so far as he was in the entire season last year. That doesn't bode well at all, does it? But a South Carolina team that is struggling itself. Spencer Rattler already has 7 interceptions. That's got to improve. Marshawn Lloyd is back. He showed some flashes, and they really need him. But I think that this is a game where Kentucky is just too tough and just a much, much better team right now than South Carolina is.
Some of the other games transpiring this weekend around the league, you have Florida hosting Missouri. Obviously, Missouri nearly shocked Georgia a week ago. And then you also have number 9 Ole Miss traveling up to Nashville, a 17-point favorite, as you would expect. And so what are your thoughts on some of those other games? I also have not mentioned the oldest rivalry in the South, which is number 2 Georgia taking on Auburn. The Dogs are a 29.5 to 30-point favorite, depending on where you look.
Yeah, and Georgia's beaten Auburn like 14 of the last 17 times they played. Auburn's really struggled in the second half just to be able to score. And I think that will continue against the Georgia defense. Now, Georgia's not perfect. We've seen that in the last 2 games against Kent State, Missouri. They've had trouble on the offensive line. They've had trouble running the ball. They ran the ball for 3 yards a carry in the first half last week, and then 7 in the second half, which made a difference with that one too. But Georgia will rebound against Auburn. And there's some rumors that if they lose that game, Brian Harsin could be fired afterwards after losing to Auburn's biggest rival besides Alabama. Look, I like Harsin. I get the fact that he's on the hot seat, but Auburn's created this problem themselves, and firing Harsin is not necessarily going to get rid of the problem because they're just lacking talent right now is a lot of it. But I think the bottom line is Georgia would be more balanced. They'll be more intense. The game's in Athens, so that will make a big difference too. Ole Miss, you mentioned, has played really well. Obviously, Luke Altmaier and Jackson Dart, their completion percentage is nowhere near what it's been over the last few years. It's like 59%. And last year it was like 10 percentage points better. But the great thing for Ole Miss is what they're doing to be able to run the ball. They lead the SEC in running. People think Lane Kiffin just likes to throw it all over the place, but everywhere Lane's been, he likes to run the ball. So that's the thing that you see. Vanderbilt, unfortunately, even with improvements, Bubba, is last in the SEC in pretty much all the defensive categories. Florida, Missouri is an interesting game. Florida, I think, getting better at this point with the Billy Napier. I love Napier. I think Napier is going to do a great job at Florida once he gets the talent there, and they just don't have it as of yet. Anthony Richardson playing well. I thought the Kitna kid got in the game, the backup quarterback. His dad obviously played in the NFL. I thought that was significant. But Florida's strengths is its offensive line and its running backs. So that's how well they play. They've got to shore up that defense. They've got to have Ventrell Miller in there, Brenton Cox, Amari Burney, among some of the guys who are playing well. I don't know emotionally, frankly, after the game at Auburn and the Georgia game, what Missouri's got left in the tank. Do they play hard? And I think Brady Cook's a good quarterback. They're still trying to replace Tyler Beatty, who is one of the better running backs in the league, who went to the NFL. But again, listen, Bubba, the big theme for the league this week is who's going to play at quarterback, or maybe even who's not going to play at quarterback. Will Bryce Young play at Alabama? Will Levis at Kentucky? And KJ Jefferson at Auburn, at Arkansas? That would make a real difficulty for those teams if those starting quarterbacks, all 3 of the best in the league, don't play.
No doubt. And Brent, really appreciate your time this evening. If you would, tell folks how they can listen to your show and how they can follow you on social media.
Yeah, I appreciate that. At Brent Beard, Beaird, is my Twitter account. First Coast News. I'm the college football analyst for them here in the Jacksonville, Florida area. And also, Second Helping is a podcast I do with Travis Ryer, the senior analyst for Bama Online. And the SEC is kind of in all caps with Second Helping. So look that up, and folks, and give us a listen. We would appreciate that. And Bubba, always enjoy talking some SEC football with you.
What a great I tell you what a legend. I love him, and I appreciate you, Bubba, very much for having him on. I know we want to talk about a few more games, and then we'll come promote our content and get out of here. But certainly, when you look at Bubba, I've got some games. Are you ready to talk some games?
Yeah, one of the teams we have mentioned, but we had not mentioned this matchup, I don't believe, and that's number 11 Utah going out to Westwood to take on the 18th ranked UCLA Bruins. We talked about how UCLA is 5-0 and really playing well under Chip Kelly. I mean, so many trying times over the last few years since Kelly took that job, and you were wondering, hey, is this even going to work out? But now it certainly seems like it will, and I'm going to be interested to see how it goes. And their quarterback, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, he's had a heck of a year so far, completing right at 75% of his passes, 11 touchdowns to just one pick, and has thrown for over 1,200 yards while also running for a little over 200 yards and 3 scores.
Yeah, I tell you, Bubba, one of the games I'm going to be paying attention to is actually two of our opponents in the American. Houston's at Memphis on Saturday night, and that's going to be on ESPN2 at 7:30. I'm looking forward to. I know you and Bubba, you and Kyle and Matt and I love the American, and we love following all of college football. But it's also interesting to see future Pirate opponents and how they play out. But that's a game that I'm looking forward to watching on Saturday night after the Pirate, hopefully Pirate victory. Yeah,
and the Memphis Tigers will be coming to Dowdy Ficklen on October 15th for a 7:30 kickoff. And, like you're saying, as much as Memphis wants to win that one, Houston needs to win it in the worst way. They're really having some struggles here in the first half of the season.
No doubt. Hey, Bubba, I'm just curious. Do you think I don't know what that buyout is, but do you think at some point, I mean, we thought that by now that those of us that know the Houston, a lot of Houston folks that come on our show, but you would think by now that Holgorsen would really have this program cooking. I mean, I was thinking about him last night, as a matter of fact. He's getting, remember, Bubba, we were like, wow, the wow factor was a 10. $4 million a year to coach at Houston. And with that Houston fan base, and Bubba, I know that you're about a decade younger, if my memory serves me right. When I was a kid, the Southwest Conference, we talked about on the show before, but man, Houston was huge back in the 80s when I was growing up, following college football and being a fan. And those were the kind of teams in that Southwest Conference. That's who was on Saturday. Either like that or you didn't. And maybe Alabama, Notre Dame thrown in there. But how many more games? Maybe he'll make it this year, but he's just one that I just see them, unless the buyout is so much that they can't afford it. I'm ready to see that chapter end.
It's frustrating as the start has been this year, being 2-3 and 0-1 after being a top 25 team, and expected to contend for the AAC, and they still could. But going back to last year, I don't think his job is in jeopardy this year, unless the wheels totally fall off, and they only win a game or something down the stretch, which I don't think is going to happen, because you look at it last year, they were 12-2 and 8-0 in the AAC, and then obviously lost the championship game at Cincinnati. So I think when you go 12-2, 8-0, and they're moving to the Big 12, I think there's enough positive things going on when you have that type of success that you had last year, even as frustrating as the 2 previous years were. The Coach Holgerson will certainly be on solid footing for the next year or two.
I definitely hope so, and we'll see. We'll see. I just, by the way, Brandon, thank you so much. The game is actually, I was talking about Memphis and Houston. It's actually tomorrow night. I misspoke, so thank you for that. I did know that, but I said Saturday, meaning I should have said Friday night. So if you're watching the live, it'll be tomorrow night. And maybe you're actually viewing it or our archives. It'll be Friday for some of you that are doing that. So we'll see. Some other games of notes for me, certainly UNC is at Miami, and that'll be 4:00 on Saturday afternoon. I knew a big one, Bubba, believe it or not. How about Mike Elko going down to Atlanta, and they're going to be taking on Georgia Tech, the Yellow Jackets at 4:00 on Saturday afternoon. So we'll see how if the Blue Devils can win another one, going 5-1.
Yeah, a Georgia Tech team that's coming off
that was
a very surprising win over Pittsburgh. They cut Jeff Collins loose as well as the AD, and then they go up to Pittsburgh and are victorious at the, I don't remember what they call it now, the former Heinz Field.
Heinz Field was so easy to exactly, Bubba. Heinz Field was so easy to remember. We have people that are national hosts that I hear all the time on radio, whether it's terrestrial radio or satellite radio, and they cannot remember the name of that stadium. So you and I are not alone in that, my friend. How about Notre Dame BYU? That's going to be a great one Saturday night on NBC, Bub, at 7:30. Another one that has my eye.
Yeah, that's an intriguing matchup for a number of reasons. But you had Notre Dame, who started the year in the top 10, and obviously they got knocked off by Marshall and then suffered another loss. And then, you take a look at it now, it's kind of a bit of a role reversal where they're actually the favorite, but they're the team that's unranked, and you have BYU that's essentially in the top 15, I think 16th in one poll, and I'm not sure about the other. But despite that, going on the road to South Bend, they're a 3 or 3.5 point dog to the Fighting Irish. And BYU, that was a rivalry game last week where they struggled before putting Utah State away in the second half. But intrigued to see how this one will play out, not only for the obvious reasons, but also with East Carolina playing BYU here in a few weeks. Intrigued to see how the Cougars are going to be playing leading into that matchup on that Friday night in Provo when the Pirates head out there.
I got a couple more games. I know, Bubba, we're running a little bit long tonight. How about Florida State going to Raleigh to NC State? We'll see if NC State can keep it going. Dave Doran and company. And that's going to be on the ACC network at 8:00 on Saturday night. So what's your thoughts on Florida State versus NC State?
Yeah, two teams coming off of hard-fought losses. NC State falling 30-20 down in Death Valley, a game that was a 4-quarter ball game. And then a top 10 matchup. And then you had Wake Forest, knocking off Florida State in Tallahassee on the previous undefeated Seminoles. Wake Forest coming off a hard-fought loss in overtime to Clemson. So will be very interesting to see, Florida State, how they handle a road trip against a very solid opponent like NC State, coming off their initial loss of the season.
No doubt about it. And we're talking about NC State. Hopefully Wolfpack fans won't be the typical. I haven't heard them this week because obviously I'm an East Carolina guy, but I hope they won't be down in the dumps because they've got a good football program, and we'll see how the second half of the season plays out. The last one I have, Bubba, is one that I think is the most overrated coach in all of college football, and that would be Jimbo Fisher. The Texas A&M Aggies going to Tuscaloosa, and that's going to be with Alabama and Crimson Tide. That's on CBS at 8:00. The reason I picked that is just I think that's being one of the primetime matchups. I think Alabama wins that one big, but I heard you talk about that game and with Brennan. I didn't know the reason that's why I brought that game up. I didn't know that Jimbo has a $90 million buyout. Wow, that's just incredible. Did you know that, Bubba?
I didn't recall exactly what the buyout was. I knew it was probably somewhere in that neighborhood. Based on I know his initial contract, he was making $75 million over 10 years, and then I knew that had been upped to 90 or 100 million. So doesn't shock me, but yeah, I think Jimbo's certainly safe for this year. And unless things just totally fell apart, which I don't think is going to happen. But nonetheless, the Aggies are not going to be happy with if they go 8-4 or something of that nature. But another game that I don't think we've mentioned that I'm definitely intrigued by is I think 3-2 Oklahoma against 3-2 Texas. Texas has the loss in the Big 12, obviously at Texas Tech, and then Oklahoma dropped 2 conference games, losing at home to K-State before getting blown out last week in Fort Worth. So if Oklahoma is going to have a chance to contend this year in a very parity-ridden Big 12, I guess you could say, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility for them to have a chance to compete for the conference championship with 2 losses. But if they fall in the Red River shootout, and I'm not going to call it the Red River rivalry, I'll still call it the Red River shootout. They are going to have to find a way to take care of business against the Longhorns at the state fair there at the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, that's still you're exactly right, Bubba. It doesn't matter they're not ranked. That is a huge game every year in college football, and you can't go a year without talking about that matchup. So thank you for. I'm extremely. I usually don't mention this, but I'm extremely exhausted tonight. It's been a long week or a couple weeks at work, and personally and professionally. Bubba knows how I am with. He has work, and then having a family. You have kids playing sports, so it's been. No complaints, though. I enjoy every single second of it for sure. And by the way, Bubba, before we go, I've got one more thing that I'm going to mention. I'm really proud of my alma mater, my high school alma mater. And I know this is a college football preview, but I want to give a shout out to Brian Pascal and all the great folks at Riverside High School. 7-0, Bubba. The big matchup, I wish we lived closer, is this coming Friday night. Not tomorrow night. They have a bye. But they're taking on Tarboro, and Tarboro, as you know, is one of the best teams in Eastern North Carolina, in the state of North Carolina, 1A. And it's going to be a great matchup. Tarboro has a loss, and the Knights of Riverside don't. And that's going to be in Williamston. And, it's going to be a huge matchup. Cannot wait. I wish it was this coming or tomorrow night and not a week away. But anyway, I'm looking for that. All right, so I want to remind everybody about our great programming. By the way, make sure that you do that. I love our programming. I want to give a shout out to Coach Jeff Connors, Advanced Empowerment. He actually has done a great job on our show every Monday night. He's got lots of great guests and a lot of great ones coming up in the next few weeks. So make sure that you Absolute Empowerment on Monday nights. And then how about coming up on Tuesdays? We have our Pirate preview. We had a great one there. If you haven't had a chance to listen about the Pirates, big matchup. We had Corey Glory on Tuesday night. And of course, last night we had Sonny and Semenza. Love those two guys. I'm telling you, they're awesome. And also the Pirate Breakdown. I was actually a special guest last night with Sutton Young. Of course, Thursday nights, the Inside Slant, as we get you ready for a weekly college football preview. And then tomorrow, oh my goodness, Bubba has got a great guest for A Pirate's Life for Me, Maurice Kemp. Are you kidding me? I cannot wait to. Bubba does a nice job with that show. And Sights and Sounds, we won't have that because it's not a home game for Saturday. And then on Sunday night, we look back and reflect, hopefully, on a Pirate win against Tulane and the Green Wave. That's a 3:30 game, as you guys may know. on ESPNU. People, Pirate fans are upset. All these ESPN Plus matches. Well, guess what? We have a game on national television, and that'll be, again, Saturday afternoon, 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central on ESPNU. Looking forward to it for sure. Want to remind everyone to obviously we have some great supporters of the program. If you'd like to be a sponsor, then get a hold of us, and you can do so by emailing the show. And you can do that, thesportsobj@gmail.com, thesportsobj@gmail.com. Get in touch with us. Love to have you. There are a lot of people that are getting ready to sponsor us soon, so looking forward to that. And L&K Custom Homes, they are actually Kevin Walker. Want to thank Kev for his support of the program. And in fact, he's a title sponsor for the Pirate Playback every Sunday night. Kevin was one of the best ever to be one of the best D-backs, you could argue for sure. That 1983 team had, I believe it was 8 different members of went on to play drafted between the NFL and CFL and USFL, I believe, if my memory serves me right. But Kev, appreciate him support the program. Again, L&K Custom Homes. Check out his work on Facebook. It's tremendous. Also want to remind you about Porky's Backyard Barbecue. In fact, Porky's, you can contact the Holiday Brothers. And tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen, come on out, because yours truly, I am going to be doing karaoke along with my good friend Charles Smith. We call him Sir Charles. Mitchell Griffin, my good friend, also will be there. He's those guys are singers, not me, but I'll be twisting the dials and making sure everything happens. And we love karaoke. So come on out. And that is on right in front of the old Walmart shopping center. It's called Roanoke Landing. It was back in the day, a Captain D's, and that's where Porky's Backyard Barbecue is in Williamston. It's going to be 7 p.m. until, and they're going to have barbecue. They have, I believe, barbecue chicken, a lot of great stuff there tomorrow night. It starts at 7 o'clock, and normally they close at 8, but as long as there's people there, they're going to stay open for a good while. So if you're buying food and you're singing the night away and enjoying yourself and having a good time, and then come on out to Porky's Backyard Barbecue. Again, that's tomorrow night. Love to have you for a great night of fun and karaoke, singing, and having a good time. And then last but not least, pgxgloves.com. Mark Minicozzi, appreciate his support of the program. My kids, they play football, baseball, and softball, and we get all our all our gloves there at pgxgloves.com. If you, in the promo code, if you put ECU, you get 25% off your next order. Thank you, Bubba Rosenbaum. Thank you to all our great guests tonight on the Inside Slant, a weekly college football preview. And we do it every Thursday night live. And, of course, it's archived on our YouTube channel and Facebook. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody. And as always, go Pirates.